Mike, wonderful to speak to you again. And we have Enrich 2022 approaching. Last time when we had Enrich, it was just after COP26, where there was a lot of euphoria around various things which were announced, net zero announcements, GFANs, hydrogen. How much progress has the world really made in this year in between?
Well, Anish, it's fantastic to talk to you again, and I'm very excited that we're reconvening at COP27 in Egypt very shortly. It is always a major event, and it's a fantastic opportunity to talk with colleagues from different organizations all over the world as we debate the importance and how we can tackle the climate agenda. I have to say that progress since Glasgow last November has been slow, and you're right, there was lots of commitments made. But I think one of the big themes at this year's COP, and it speaks to what has happened in the intervening period, is we need to figure out how to talk about action. The day of making commitments and making ambition statements is over. And yes, it was fantastic last year, but I am, if I'm being honest, a little bit disappointed at how much progress we've made. Now, there have been some good things. I would in particular point out the GFANs initiative. That has moved at pace. It's doing a lot of good work, and we're going to see some exciting announcements at GFANs. But other issues like the mobilization of capital for developing nations has been very slow, and we really need to do something at this COP around adaptation and loss and damage.
Okay, so the world has changed between, after COP26. Now, we didn't have Ukraine conflicts, we didn't have this specter of recession at this time. So given that that's the background, what would realistically success at COP27 look like?
Well, for me, there's a couple of key issues, and everybody going to COP will come to it and say, these are the things that are important to me. But I think there's a couple of common themes emerging right throughout the global dialogue on COP27. I have to say, Anish, there's a lot of excitement building. Initially, I heard people downplaying this COP, but the reality of climate change is so real today. You only have to look at what happened in Pakistan in recent months and in other countries. I'm actually delighted that this COP is now being upgraded. It's been taken much, much more seriously. So for me, success is about a number of different things. So first of all, urgency. One of my biggest concerns about the climate agenda has just been the sheer lack of urgency. I would love to see us responding to the climate challenge in the way we did to the COVID-19 disaster. And I'm hoping that this COP, recognizing what's happened in the world in the intervening 12 months, recognizing some of the geopolitical issues, but also recognizing the physical reality of climate change and the way it's impacting on nations. So for me, that's the first thing. The second thing is the thing we just spoke about. We really need to figure out this thing about action. We've been doing a lot of talking, and everybody's got plans and everybody's got commitments. But it's really, we now really need to figure out how to turn all of this into action. And for me, Anish, one of the really exciting things happening at COP27 is going to be the spectre of transition plans. This is something which the UK government announced, but also some of the new international accounting bodies are going to insist on. GFANs are going to look on it. Companies who've made net zero commitments right across the world will be called upon to deliver climate transition plans, where they will have to set out specifically how they're going from the ambition or the commitment they've made to delivering a 1.5 degree future. And that's no small ask, actually, of these organizations. A couple of other things, as I mentioned earlier, in terms of where we fell down at the COP26, success for me will be the adaptation agenda taking center stage and the loss and damage agenda taking center stage. And the problem with both of those two agendas, Anish, is the difficulty of getting private capital to invest in those parts of the agenda. That's very much going to be a government-led initiative. Last but by no means least, nature and biodiversity this year will feature a COP. There's a separate COP on nature and biodiversity, as you probably know, in Canada in December. But one day at COP in Egypt has been specifically set aside for nature and biodiversity. And it's such a critical issue. It's completely intertwined with the climate agenda. For me, I think it's great to see that that's on the agenda.
Okay. So it's a fairly ambitious agenda, given that we've not made so much progress earlier on loss and damage, or even very broad construct of adaptation. Now, the world has been buffeted by headwinds since, as we spoke earlier. Now, to you, what are the top 2 or 3 headwinds which we have to contend against?
So there's there are definitely a couple of headwinds, Anish, as you say. Probably first and foremost is the illegal invasion of Ukraine and the resulting energy crisis, which has started off in Europe, but it's become a global energy crisis, both in terms of access, availability, and the price of energy. And for me, I think the immediate response has been we need to stop phasing down coal plants. We need to sort of redouble our efforts with increased fossil fuel production. That's a concern clearly for those of us who really believe and feel very passionate about the climate agenda. The European Union, in its response, however, actually very much aligned the low carbon agenda with the response to the energy crisis. So it's a big headwind, but I'm hoping that we will actually take this as an opportunity to drive, real investment and focus on renewables and other parts of the low carbon agenda. The other big headwind, Anish, is at a corporate level. I guess I'm getting increasingly concerned about the amount of disclosure requirements. We started off with TCFD and sustainability reports. When you look now at the CSRD in Europe, the US SEC rules, every other country's got some reporting requirement. We're going to launch transition plan reporting on top of it. I am worried about the effect that's going to have on the wider corporate world. And bear in mind, we talk about the big listed companies. I worry about all the SMEs who are going to be slowly but surely brought into this reporting environment. There's a cost and there's an effort that goes with this. So that does concern me. And thirdly, Anish, the economic recession. There's a lot of talk globally about an economic recession, and I've been involved in the climate agenda for many years. And when the financial crash hit us in 2008 and 2009, it was really disappointing because we had started to make progress on the climate agenda and we fell back. The focus was on dealing with the economic crisis. It's a headwind, but I dearly, dearly hope that will not happen this time round. Now there's much greater awareness and understanding of the climate agenda. And I'm hoping that we've got to deal with the economic crisis, but it cannot get in the way of what we're trying to do on climate.
I on the last point, I hope that what you're hoping for plays out, because I was looking at our new CEO survey, and when I saw the energy company results, they were actually saying that climate dropped from being at the top of the agenda, and it was for 36% of the CEOs, it was at the top of the agenda in 2021. In 2022, it has dropped to 9%. So I think we just understand what we are up against. Now, given that in a rather difficult situation, I wouldn't call it gloomy, I would rather be an optimist, but given the rather difficult situation, everybody has a role. What are we as KPMG doing to further the agenda which needs to be pursued?
So I'm delighted to say, Anish, we have a very significant presence at COP27 this year, covering multiple different areas, but three in particular, and there are three areas that are very close to my own heart. We are getting very involved on the innovation agenda. We're working closely with UNFCCC and a concept called the Global Innovation Hub that they launched last year. KPMG is going to become a founder of that, and that will be announced at COP. So we have a whole series of sessions around that. Secondly, probably one of the biggest topics that will feature at COP this year, but also in the wider world, is the area of just transition. I'm delighted to say that we're working with UNDP and WWF to launch a new initiative, which is called the Alliance for Just Energy Transformation. And thirdly, Anish, we've decided to focus on one big area of decarbonisation, which is the decarbonisation of the urban environment. We're going to showcase a number of technologies that can be used to help us think differently about how we decarbonise the urban environment. On top of that, we're covering lots of other areas, such as resilience, for example, but those three areas that I've identified are probably the big three areas of focus for KPMG, and look forward to meeting colleagues and friends from around the globe at Egypt in a couple of weeks' time.
Fantastic, Mike. So we'll catch you again after COP27, and we'll have a conversation on how we measure up against what we were expecting today or discussed today and what actually happened. Look forward to speaking to you again soon.
Thank you, Anish.